Hello.
Has anybody heard from Roger, who seems to be absent? Looks like Rod is calling him, maybe.
By text a few minutes ago, so I don't know why he's not on.
Okay.
Mary,
Yes,
perhaps you should call the meeting to order.
I'm going to wait till Rod is off the phone with Roger, but I am here to be backup if needed.
One moment, Bill. I just need to resend a link to Roger, and apparently there's some other people with a different link. So just one moment.
The first links to the packets that were sent out were broken. I saw that this morning.
the message in the chat. The chair and others will be joining shortly.
Okay, can folks hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So for reasons I can't yet explain, there's two meetings happening, right? There's two Zoom links that were generated. Most of the people who joined the party on the other one have rejoined us here. Because we have open meeting law obligations, I'm going to keep this one open, right? And then I'm going to be doing, I don't know, double duty to get people from there to here, all right? Because we have a lot of important business to conduct. And I don't want, I want to be compliant, which means members of the public and my colleagues, things are more challenging than ever for the role of chair, and I really need your forbearance, okay?
Thank
All
you,
right.
Rod.
Sure.
It's okay.
Wearing a lot of hats.
So I'm going to pause you and the two folks who have joined us in the other one. I'm going to encourage them to rejoin where the party is. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Hold on.
Rob Gear, is that this year's foliage behind you?
Yeah,
Nice.
that was 2 days ago.
It's been pretty good this year.
It beautiful. We saw a lovely scene in Thetford Hill
Oh, yes.
with a bunch of kids running around. And,
Oh, that might have
and
been those kids.
yeah, an adult that I shall
Okay,
remain
Rod?
nameless. Yeah. So
Rod,
Yep.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep.
I need somebody to get the toll-free number that's associated with this Zoom link. I
Yep.
need that because I need to send it to Linda in the other meeting, or not in the
Okay.
other meeting, in the other Zoom link. Okay. Because I want to get everyone here and then maintain that line open. Miranda, is that something you can do? Is that why you're raising your hand? I can't hear you, Miranda. You're on mute.
Oh,
Go ahead. I hear you now.
okay. It's the same toll-free number all the
Same
time.
toll-free number. Okay.
Yep.
So, and it's the only
She'll
thing that's
just
different
she'll
is
just
the
need the meeting ID.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Miranda.
Right.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. It is Wednesday, October 12th. It is 6:42. This is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. I'm joined by Rob Gear, Can you make me the host, please, Rob or Rod?
Yep.
I'm joined by Rob Gear, who you all see on your screen. Or maybe you don't, because now you don't have the host. Okay, add pin. Okay, Aaron Lamperti's here, Mary Layton's here, Marcia Calloway is here, and we're also joined by Rod Francis. Okay, this is a remote only meeting in accordance to the temporary provisions made in the open meeting law. As I alluded to earlier, there's some technical difficulties, so I'll be going between two screens to make sure that people who got the wrong link are able to join us in this meeting that's happening. Okay, so I appreciate everyone's forbearance with that. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I'd like to get that approval of the agenda while I step away to assist someone, okay?
Okay, I move we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Aaron. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Did I see your hand, Marcia? You're on mute.
Sorry, can you roll call?
Sure, I can roll call. Aaron, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Aaron, how do you vote? Or Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Marcia?
No.
Okay, and I'm yes. Great. Next item on the agenda is the approval of an expenditure of a police cruiser. Is that correct?
Participation.
Public participation. Great. Thank you for this list, Mary. Are there members of the public who would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda? Go ahead, Stuart.
So I'd like to read something that you, Roger, wrote on April 15, 2022. It's addressed to department heads. It says, this email says, the board takes seriously the concerns of all town employees, including the town manager, and is committed to ensuring a safe, healthy, and welcoming work environment for all employees. The board will work with deliberate speed to identify and contract with a qualified professional to investigate current complaints and to assist the town in building a positive work environment for all. The board understands that additional opportunities for creating and sustaining a healthy workplace culture will be made available to department heads through the support and direction of Town Manager Rod Francis. Thank you for the work you do on behalf of the town of Norwich. The board has authorized Claudette Brochu and I as contacts of these recent matters. Sincerely, Roger Arnold. That particular email was followed on April 22 by an email from HR Happens. They were the folks that were designated to assess the problems that existed. And what they said in their email was there are numerous complaints directed against the town manager. And there were employees who did not feel safe, unfortunately. So, you know, Roger, your words are very nice words, but it's unfortunate that they have not been fulfilled. We have an environment which is largely attributable to Mr. Francis, and it's resulted in about 15 employees leaving. They consist of the police, and they also consist, I'm almost done. They consist of the police, DPW workers, and also finance folks. So keep in mind, what we need is a question and answer period. And you have so far stonewalled that, and you're unwilling to do it. I don't know when you're going to be willing to do it or if you're willing to do it, but you ought to do it. Thank you very much.
So just to be clear, I don't know if I forget every time that I need to restate like basic norms for public participation, but please do not make personal attacks at any individual, any board member, any employee. We've other recent select board statements have said we have conducted in independent and third-party investigations, right? No workplace policies nor law have been or violations of. Okay, we feel very confident in our independent investigation. I need to, Mary, can you please take Kate White's comment while I assist someone on the other?
I simply reiterated what had been written.
Stuart, Mr. Richards, I didn't ask you to, I didn't call on you. Thank you for your public comment. I believe I said Kate White was next.
Yes. Kate White, would you state your locatable address and would you please speak?
And my name is Kate White, 53 Partridge Hill, Norwich, Vermont. I would like to speak concerning the Moore Lane Bridge. And if I can speak at this point, or do I have to wait till the later time when it's on the agenda to speak?
I think you could speak now.
I'll speak now. So and I'll be quick because I know there's other people who want to speak.
Thank you.
My concern about the containment structure on the bridge is, number one, there's been very little discussion of the issues with the bridge itself and the possible alternative solutions. Second, this is a very expensive temporary solution. It's only a temporary solution. It's not a permanent solution. The third, it requires the town to become a licensed generator of hazardous waste. I'm not sure that as a citizen of Norwich that I want the town to become a licensed generator of hazardous waste rather than a more permanent solution such as removing the bridge. And if we are to become a licensed generator of hazardous waste, who's going to approve this, and how can we be sure that it won't be expanded in the future without full approval of the citizens of the town? I'm worried about the limited sampling that was conducted. It was a simple one-time grab sample. One wouldn't expect that the water would be involved at all. One would expect to see the sediments and much farther downstream than just immediately below the bridge. This has been happening for at least 20 years when my daughter used to play in the brook. The perceived lack of transparency in the process concerns me. It's a safety problem. The easiest solution is to simply remove the bridge and just add a pedestrian bridge for the many people who walk around the loop every day, and a bike bridge, and get rid of the hazardous waste, which is what they were termed by the state of Vermont. So I would like to also last say, what is the liability to the town and the taxpayers on becoming a licensed generator of hazardous waste, and also for any future discovery of potential side effects associated with the hazardous waste? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you, Mary. Sorry. Thank you for that.
Sure.
You were probably going to mention to Ms. White that there's an agenda item discussing this.
I did allow her to speak.
Okay.
But yeah, she's aware there is an agenda item.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think Manu Tassone was next. And as Mary reminded us, please state your name and locatable address. With thanks to Mary.
Hi, good evening. Manu Tassone, 428 Hawk Pine Road. I have a couple of questions for the chair. So Roger, because the select board is not holding a Q&A session, the residents of the town have taken it upon themselves to reach out to former employees and try to find out what is happening. One of the things that's come up is the town approved the budget as normal. The budget had a big funding, enough funding for the police department. And my question to you, Roger, is we believe that the two former chiefs requested funding for equipment they needed, and you personally turned it down. I'd like to put that on the record as a question and see whether that's true or not regarding police cameras and other communication equipment. And if that is a yes, I think we would appreciate knowing why you personally decided not to provide the funding that the town had approved. I'm asking the question. I don't know if that's true or not. I'd like to hear. And then the next one is this. From an objective viewpoint, not having all the information, and following up on Stuart's question about the alleged behavior of our town manager, when employees state that they don't feel safe, etc., and that seems to not be addressed in a public way. The question is this: does the board believe that you are creating the environment for those employees to file lawsuit against the town and putting the town in a very serious financial position? This can be a big contingent HR liability for our town. As members of the board, you have a fiduciary responsibility to look after the interests of the town. And as I wrap up, I'd like to clarify that as you look after the interests of the town and not your personal interests and opinions as to what should happen, I do hope you understand the risk you may be potentially. I'm not saying this is true or not. I don't know. There's no Q&A session, but you could potentially be putting the town in very, very serious financial risk. Thank you.
Mary, I need you to chair the meeting until I'm able to solve this, okay? So I just want to very quickly say that the police department, we're literally buying a cruiser right now, all right? We need to attend to some of the budget that we have approved in the last fiscal year. Furthermore, no board member, either acting on their own, privately, or in a public meeting, has any authority or any ability to make any decisions for the town's spending budget. It requires a majority of a board. And obviously, I encourage you as you meet to learn more about how the government functions in that way. And we're happy to, if you have any questions about that, we can. I'm sure board members would answer that. Mary, I'm going to have you turn over the rest of the public comment period.
Okay,
Rod, can you please assist Mary in queuing up who is on deck?
That would be helpful, yes. Is
Okay.
Rod there?
Yep.
Okay. Can you tell me who's next?
I think it was Jan.
Jan?
Yep.
Okay. Jan Losberg?
All right. Thank you. Jan Losberg. It's 95 Upper Pasture Road. I'd like to focus briefly on a couple of topics that are uniquely the Select Board's responsibility. First, I was glad to see that personnel topics was on the list to be a future agenda item. And second, the topic of the town manager's goals is also an important related topic. I would hope and I would expect that the performance goals of the town manager include being open to input and respectful of town residents and being factual in his communication. In an October 7th email to Peter Orner, the town manager stated that no one else other than Peter had spoken or submitted correspondence on the topic of the Moore Lane Bridge. However, the Select Board meeting packet for September 28th contains 2 letters, including one from me, and also there was a comment from a Select Board member asking for the topic to be placed on a future agenda. So making an inaccurate statement is bad. Doing so in order to trivialize and minimize a resident's concern is worse. Peter was not the only one that spoke about it. He was not the only one that submitted correspondence. It's a misrepresentation that is disrespectful to Peter. It's disrespectful to those of us who commented, and it sends the wrong message to residents. So I hope that the Select Board will be evaluating the town manager to define goals that include openness, service, and respect to town residents, and accuracy in his statements. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rod, who is next?
I believe it was Elena Baruch. I hope I pronounced the last name properly.
Is it Alina?
Alina, yes.
Hi, yes, and I'm in the car with my children, so I apologize if there is noise. So I'm calling, and I believe Bill is talking on this point too, so if I don't get it all across. We're calling about the parking on Turnpike Road. So I'm at 1737 Turnpike Road, just next to Guile Mountain. And so the issue basically has been, we moved in about a year ago, and on our moving day, we were almost unable to get into our driveway because of the number of cars that were blocking us, that were parked along the road, spillover from the parking right next to Guile Mountain Trailhead. Which is, it's beautiful. We understand we're pretty flexible people. This is why we moved to Vermont. But the parking has gotten to a point where I'm worried that if there's an emergency at our house or at our neighbor's house, that a fire truck could not reasonably access our house. I had trouble even leaving my house the other day. I had to squeeze through cars parked on both sides of the road now. So it's really become a hazard for our family and for our neighbors. This morning I woke up, on a work day, and at 6:30 there were already, I would say, 30 cars parked on the road. So I would just implore you also for the maintenance of the trail. But it's a lot of out-of-state cars. I'm not quite sure what the solution is, but this definitely needs to be looked at. So I'll let others speak on the issue, but this is something that we feel strongly about. Happy to supply photos of what we've witnessed. We've called the police. I understand there are no local police this moment, so they're not able to provide tickets. When we spoke with the state police, they are kind of against towing vehicles, which I totally understand because that would strand people there. But again, this is a hazard to the neighbors, and I think just public safety in general. So I think we should take a look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And is Bill?
And I believe Bill Scavone is the last person to speak.
Yes, thank you. And actually, Elena hit a lot of my points, but I'll go with what I prepared. I'm actually at 1655 Turnpike, so I'm before the trail, and I do not experience necessarily the parking at my house, but I have had for 10 years a great concern for my neighbors. And the experiences of the neighbors that used to live in Elena's house were for 20 plus years before, and so the issue gets bigger. So for my prepared remarks, before I begin, I would like to say right here now that I myself should have more often expressed my appreciation for the services our police department have provided, which I do see in other letters. I wanted to raise awareness of my letter that I sent last Thursday to the manager and select board. The letter's purpose was to inform or remind the town representatives of the annual event on Turnpike Road, wherein hundreds of tourists drive to the Guile Mountain Trail on peak foliage days and park in such a way that obstructs the roadway for extensive distances before and after the parking lot. Incidentally, when I drove by late afternoon on Saturday, there were no cars in the parking lot. All the cars were on the road.
Oh, right.
So we've had that issue before. In the past, we have relied quite a bit on the Norwich police to mitigate the issue. Parking in the roadway often reaches a point where emergency vehicles may not be able to pass, either to assist people on the trail or at residences beyond the constrictions. This is not academic. Norwich EMTs have responded to at least one life-threatening emergency beyond the trail that was fortunate to have occurred midweek on a not-so-pretty leaf day in between two weekends. Had it occurred on either weekend before or after, the outcome could have been dire. Often visitors are unable to move their vehicles to allow others to pass, much less emergency vehicles, with cars attempting to move in both directions at once on a roadway barely wide enough without parked cars. If a vehicle owner is on the trail, they may be unable to clear a blockage for the fire department. This year, especially Saturday, and Elena wasn't home, right, was a major event. It coincided with a large gathering at Dartmouth, a near perfect peak foliage condition, and unsurpassed weather. It also occurred on a weekend when our police officer was not on duty. This year, I placed two calls to Norwich Police Department several hours apart. Both were redirected as expected to Hartford Dispatch. I missed a call back from the state police on the first call around 12:30, but there was no other response later in the day. In previous years, Norwich Police would respond several times to residents' calls and would disperse the traffic, issue warnings and citations, and take some pressure off before the congestion built up again. For those who don't know, there is currently no official signage along the road to inform visitors that it is illegal to block the roadway. In my opinion, the traffic congestion and parking in the roadway this year was nonstop and greater than I've seen any time in the past 10 years. Typically, 4 to 6 cars at a time would be driving up and down at the same time in close proximity to pedestrians, threading the needle in locations where the roadway drops steeply on both sides. As in many years, the traffic began prior to sunrise and continued past dark. I saw at least one vehicle that needed extraction from a ditch at Bramble Lane, which is about a little bit over a half a mile away, in the hour before sunset. Most visitors are not familiar at all with the roadway, and many drive too fast. Earlier today, I sent 2 additional photos taken on Saturday to the town manager and select board. But photos and even video are inadequate to what can be witnessed in person. In fact, they are fairly misleading. This is an annual event and can span several weekends, including a holiday. It's not on everyone's radar, but it is easily anticipated and could be managed with forethought and input from citizens and from the police, fire, and public works departments. While there are so many other reasons, this is one cogent illustration of our reliance on the Norwich Police, as well as our other value departments. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, Peter Orner, I believe is next.
Thank you, Mary. Peter Orner, 6 Moore Lane. I want to thank Kate White and Jan for their earlier comments. And I realize that the Moore Lane Bridge is on agenda item for later in the evening, but that's quite late. And I assume that many people who are currently on won't be here. So I'll say my piece now as briefly as I can. The issue is tonight is on the agenda. It seems as though it's about approval. It's about approval of a containment structure to contain a hazardous material. What an independent report that the town commissioned has determined is a significantly hazardous material. What does that mean? I have been trying to find out for many weeks now. But according to the independent report, one of the samples turned up a chemical called naphthalene, and it is above the residential level. Now I'm trying to find out, in fact, what this means. The town manager is going to say later that the material, the significantly hazardous material, is non-toxic.
I wouldn't put words in his mouth, but go ahead.
Forgive me. The town manager has expressed in a number of emails publicly that the significantly hazardous material is non-toxic, common, and even at one point actually suggested that if children didn't eat it, it was going to be okay. Now, I have been asking for a number of weeks now for some public health analysis of the situation underneath the Moore Lane Bridge, and I haven't been able to get any actual answers as to how significantly hazardous this material is. I can't square the independent report, significantly hazardous chemicals, with non-toxic, non-threatening, etc. The state of Vermont, after 2 years ago, asked Norwich to stop polluting Bloody Brook. This was after I notified the town in August 2019. It took 2 years for the town to take any action whatsoever while Bloody Brook was polluted. To this day, today, Bloody Brook is being polluted by a significantly hazardous chemical listed, a number of them listed in the independent report. So here's what I'm asking in a nutshell, is that we find out exactly what these chemicals are and the public health issues involved. Are they a danger to public health? If the state of Vermont says that this stuff is illegal and shouldn't be polluting Bloody Brook, what does this mean for those of us who are in daily contact, such as me and my family, with this material? According to the CDC, this is extremely harmful stuff. And so my last thing I want to say is I'm just asking for us to take a pause before you all approve and then lock us into a contract. Look into what's going on before you approve a situation where you're going to kick this down the road, because the bridge is still emanating this chemical when you put the storage containment structure underneath it. All right. I think you need to wrap this up. Thank you. Can you give me one more second? A second, yes. Because Mary, please make it okay. Mary, I know the town manager is going to talk a great deal about this without any public comment. I live very close to this. On summer days, I have young children, elderly parents. I can't actually sit outside my house because of the intense odor. I want to know if this odor is harmful to my family, to myself, and to people walking by.
Right. And I think you've made that really clear. I think it's very serious. We're taking your comments seriously. And, you know, we'll try to look into it. The messages we get from the state are probably not very reassuring. And there are factors like the dilution factor. If you ate a cup of salt, you would not be doing very well.
Mary, can I
don't think any of us are happy about this situation, and I want you to wrap it up.
Okay. The state toxicologist is looking into this. The Department of Environmental Conservation, as Rod and Roger have told me many times, don't deal with odor and don't deal with public health. But that doesn't mean the state isn't interested in public health. The state toxicologist I have been in touch with is meeting with the Department of Environmental Conservation this week. So I implore you, don't make a decision about the containment structure until we have more information about what this material is and why it is so harmful to the environment, according to the Department of Environmental Conservation, and potentially harmful to public health. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Stuart, I believe you've already made a public comment, and I think we should move on with our meeting. So.
I'm back now, Mary, but I kind of like the energy that you have going. So I'm happy to carry on.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I think I understand Peter's concern, and it is a health concern. And Stuart, you've had your chance for public comment. So my idea is to move on to number 4, which would be authorizing the purchase of the new police cruiser.
Okay, Mary, would you like me to resume, or do you want to continue?
If you're ready, Roger, I think I'll just turn it back to you.
Okay. I really appreciate you. Thank you for that. And we've gotten everyone over here, so I feel good about that. Okay. So yes. So very quickly, as Rod outlines in a memo, we approved a budget, or we sent a budget to the voters, which they approved, right? And that included an allocation for this RAV4 that we are asked to make. We ordered it in April, right? There was some supply chain issues, and so it has showed up for us. It showed up for us now. And so, Rod, unless you have something to add as background, I would like just to ask for a motion. You're on mute.
Well, just to clarify, I think Mary may have misspoken. She may refer to it as a cruiser, and it's in fact not. And that's not its intended use.
That's
It'll be an unmarked vehicle for administrative and office use,
right?
Primarily.
And this is part of a replacement schedule, right? Which includes 3 cruisers and then 1 car. And we looked at the replacement schedule of every 10 years.
Right. I believe that it's replacing a 4-door sedan that was purchased in 2011.
Okay. So with that background in mind, I'd like to take a motion so we can have further discussion.
All right. I move to authorize the town manager to purchase from Alderman's Toyota of Rutland, Vermont, a Toyota RAV4 hybrid for a price not to exceed $28,594 to be paid with funds from the Police Department Cruiser Reserve Fund.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Okay, any further discussion on this? This is an approval of an expenditure. Go ahead, Mary.
So if I understand correctly, there also is a police cruiser on order. And this is just the RAV4 is available now for us to, is that true?
Correct. So the budget also allowed for the purchase of a full-size cruiser, a Ford Explorer cruiser, and the order for that has been placed. We've had that confirmed in the past month. We don't have a delivery date. We do understand that it's one of the vehicles that's been impacted by the microchip shortage, and there's no fixed date for its delivery at this point. But the expectation is that, and the hope certainly is that we will receive it before the end of the financial year. Which
and
would
it's
be
also
June.
a hybrid?
Yeah, both hybrids.
Okay, so we're doing our best, but supply chains are, holding us up.
Yep.
Right. They were ordered in April. Marcia, did you have a discussion point?
Yeah. So the warrant, we don't have a warrant for this from the reserve fund expenditures. Should we have that this time?
We never do. We would never do that. That's never our practice.
Okay, but it'll come from the reserve funds, and ultimately, wouldn't there used to be warrants? We talked about this last time.
No.
No.
Not when we authorize expenditures from them.
Got it. Okay, but there is
Right.
enough money in that reserve account.
There's more than enough money in the reserve account to cover this purchase and the purchase of the Ford that's on order. And the way it gets paid is it gets paid out of the general fund, and then there's a journal entry that effectively moves money from the reserve fund back into the general fund.
Okay. Great. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Rob.
When's the next vehicle scheduled for replacement? Do you have that information right off the top of your head?
So they're 10-year. So they were all they're on a 10-year replacement schedule, and Rob is alluding to a few. Some might be in year, like they're due in year 8, right? So do you recall how? I don't know. They're generally all at the same time because they were all burned, as we know, right?
Right. So we have one hybrid cruiser right now and a non-hybrid cruiser, and this the new hybrid cruiser that's been put on order will replace the non-hybrid cruiser, and we have 2 4-doors. So I believe that there's one other aging vehicle, and there's a question as to whether that'll be kept or not, I guess. But so I think with the RAV4 we'll have a hybrid office car and 2 hybrid cruisers. So I think there's 1 cruiser further to replace with another hybrid in the next 2 or 3 years.
And I
Go
think
ahead. Go ahead, Rob. Do you want to finish your point, and then Aaron?
I wanted to finish. I would love to see that since the supply chain is so stretched out and lengthy, I would love to see it if we could place an order for a fully electric vehicle like a F-150 Lightning, with the knowledge that that's going to take 2 years before it would possibly arrive anyways, and would at least put us on schedule and making a real transition.
Okay.
It's not part of this, but that's a future agenda item.
I was about to refocus us, so thank you, Rob. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Aaron.
I just am wondering, I mean, we have 3 cruisers and a commuter car. I don't think we ever have 3 officers on duty who need to be in cruisers. I'm just asking the question, why do we need 3 cruisers do we ever use them all at once? Or is it for maintenance reasons or what?
Do you want me to answer that, Roger?
I think so, because I think for the benefit of the public, and then Aaron, because we did talk about this at great length in our budget discussions, but it's a good to have a reminder. So go ahead, please.
Okay. So thank you for the question, Aaron. The rationale here, and views differ, is that either you have a shorter replacement period, i.e. less than 10 years, or you have more vehicles, but that because of the operational use of police vehicles, even though they may not do many miles in a shift or in a week, they're actually on and using their systems, particularly their electrical system, for communications. And so the wear and tear on a police vehicle is dramatically different from a regular vehicle. They've generally found in practice that given the more intense maintenance schedule for police vehicles, that it's better to have 3 vehicles, even though there's not always 3 officers on shift. so that there's a spare car, or that's operative while one of the other vehicles is in service, and that each of the vehicles is not any one of the vehicles is overused in a regular shift cycle. So it's customary to have effectively more vehicles than you may reasonably expect, just because of the service duty of police vehicles. The alternative is to have a smaller number of vehicles and a shorter turnover period. So that instead of replacing them every 10 years, you'd be replacing them every 5 or 7 years. And so the analysis that we did for the last budget was that the sweet spot was a 10-year replacement cycle and 4 vehicles versus 3 vehicles and a 7-year replacement cycle.
So I think what Rob and you are alluding to is we started first with the replacement schedule, right, which was something that we lacked in prior administrations and in prior budget discussions. We had recommendations and comparables, but we didn't have that replacement schedule. We approved or understood a rationale for that replacement schedule, which then allowed us to budget for the vehicle fleet that we have now. So if we want to change that process, as Rod has alluded to, or we look at the replacement schedule, we can, but I think that we all agreed that the replacement schedule first and then allocation of the money was a good budget process. So we have a motion on the table. And if anyone has any questions or comments on this expenditure, go ahead. Okay, then I'll call the question if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next is the appointments to the Energy Committee. So I'll clarify for folks. The board didn't solicit or do a call for applications. The Energy Committee has come to us. They had identified some members of our community for our resignations, in part because we welcomed Aaron to our board, and so he has stepped down from the Energy Committee. So we have 2 applicants. I don't know if the applicants are with us or if they were advised to attend. So go ahead, Rob. Do you want to tell me who I should be bringing over?
Eva Rosenblum and Rod. Yeah,
no,
okay.
I said Rob actually, but go ahead. I meant
okay. Eva Rosenblum.
Okay, I'll bring
Garrett Heaton.
Okay, let me bring these folks over if they can turn on their cameras.
They have.
Okay, excellent. So why don't we why don't we just ask, we'll begin with a question. So I think what we do normally is just say like, hi, can you introduce yourself and tell us why you would be interested in joining this committee is what we ask. So I'll turn first to you, Eva Rosenblum.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Eva Rosenblum. I want 137 Hobson Road. I have an architectural background in project management, and then I recently obtained a master's in sustainability. So my focus is on decarbonizing buildings specifically. So I have some experience with the Energy Committee already, and that I believe in 2020, I started the GHG inventory for the municipal buildings in Norwich, and I currently have all that data. And then I now work for a nonprofit called Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, which is a mission-driven nonprofit to decarbonize the world. And I work in their Carbon-Free Buildings Institute. So I'm very excited about working on the Energy Committee in this both municipal and local community scale. And I hope I can add expertise and support and research as needed.
Thank you so much. And then, of course, also your work on our Article 36, of course, which we haven't forgotten, though it may seem like we have. But so thank you for that work as well. Okay, so I'll ask the same question to Garrett and Garrett Heaton. can you just say hello and then why you're interested in joining this committee?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Roger. Yeah, Garrett Heaton, I'm at 1012 Turnpike Road. Also see all the cars going up and down the last weekend. I don't have any professional history that's as interesting as Eva's. I just have become interested in modern topics of home electrification, climate tech, et cetera. And I started attending the energy committee meetings and volunteering at some of the outreach events and things. And it was at that point that I learned that they were even looking for new members to join. So that's sort of how I find myself here, just sort of looking to start getting involved in the town. And this seems like an area where I could start to contribute as I also work to sort of transition my professional life into the climate tech space, although that's sort of an ongoing thing. I think that's it. Thanks.
Great. That's great. Thanks. I know there might be some board member questions, but I just want to let board members know that there's two motions because there's two terms. And I think Miranda had communicated in the motion sheet where one term is up in 2023. One is replacing a term that ends in 2023, and one is replacing a term that ends in 2024. But and so I think the suggestion is in the language. Go ahead, Rod. Do you want to clarify?
I think you got your numbers a little off. So one term ends 2026, Roger, and the other one ends 2024.
Well, I was just getting to that. So I think that the idea is that the appointment that would normally have expired in March, the 2023 one, I think there's a suggestion that you make the appointment for 2026 and that the other one be to 2024. So I think that is what the language is suggesting, rather than, which is a good suggestion, rather than have someone until March and then ask them to reapply. So that is I just wanted to clarify that for the group. Okay. So do we have any questions for these groups? And then I'll take some motions for each of these terms. Go ahead, Mary.
No, I don't have questions. I think I'm very excited about each candidate. I might recommend that Eva be considered for the 3-year term because she's experienced. She's already helped us out with, a lot of good information. And then Garrett could get his feet wet with a shorter term and then hopefully apply again if he likes it. So that would be my suggestion of the order.
Yeah, and it looks like the candidates like that idea. I saw Garrett thumbs up,
yeah.
but didn't even know she's in deep, I guess. Okay, go ahead, Marcia. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have both. My comment is I'm a little uncomfortable making appointments when we haven't advertised. I've always been concerned about the sort of lack of turnover in people in the community. And while I recognize that these folks might be very qualified and have volunteered to do stuff, and so represent that new incoming blood that I like to see, I do think it's not fair if we don't advertise so that people can have an opportunity to apply. Having said that, I think every group should be asked the same thing about conflicts. And so I know, both of them are, well, one of them is working sort of in some tech stuff, and the young man is actually has done some fledgling tech stuff. And I'm just concerned, would they please answer the question, is there any possibility that there could be any conflicts with financial gains? I'm especially thinking about maybe there was a consumer application that Garrett had once developed. So I'm just wondering if they could just answer that for the record.
So Marcia, our application asks if there's any conflict of interest and asks
no. Yeah.
And they have disclosed no.
Yeah.
So I think
they can just tell us that they, aren't doing anything that would possibly be a conflict. I would prefer to hear it.
I think I'm satisfied by the application, and it's paper. But thank you. Okay.
So that's you won't let them answer.
I don't think it's an appropriate question. I think we asked the question on our application if there's any conflicts of interest, and we asked them to disclose any. So I feel like our application is rigorous against your concerns. Okay. Any board members have any other questions? Go ahead, Aaron.
I don't have any questions, but I know both applicants, and they are certainly excellent and will serve the community and the committee well.
That's great. Thank you. Mary, you had suggested some motions that you would like to make. Do you want to make them?
Yes. I move to appoint Eva Rosenblum to the Energy Committee for a 3-year term ending on March 30th, 2026. That's the first one.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eva. And then another motion.
I move to appoint Garrett Heaton to the Energy Committee for the remainder of an unexpired 3-year term ending on March 30th, 2024.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Oh,
Aaron. Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Aaron. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thank you so much. Thank you to our applicants. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome to it. Okay, thank you. I know. All right.
Our condolences.
Yes, it's going to be great. All right. Next is the town manager's report. Go ahead, Rod. Do you want to start for us?
Sure. Thank you, Roger. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to take this moment to introduce you to the next Norwich Police Chief. It's Detective Sergeant Wade Cochran. He's with us tonight briefly. I want to just outline some of the key highlights of Wade's background. So Wade grew up in rural Vermont, spent time early in his career as a carpenter and working dispatch, then moved through the Berry City Police Department and then on to the Montpelier City Police Department, where he still is employed. He's spent several years working on the Drug Task Force for Vermont and several years working for, on the FBI Task Force, where he's gained immeasurable experience and developed the skills that would make him a great police chief. So I'd just like to welcome Wade to the community and give everyone on the select board a chance to say hello. And that's it. So Roger, if you'd like to just lead off with some select board remarks, that would be great.
Yes. So I brought Mr. Cochran over. Is that how you pronounce your last name, sir?
Just Wade. Wade, please.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yes. So I brought Wade over to us. So we had the benefit of putting a face to the name, and we can say hello. Will I understand that the first day is October 25th? So soon?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know that Rod had suggested that he and the department plan sort of an open house so folks in the community and also as board members could engage in conversation with you. So I don't know if you would welcome that. Okay. And then, okay. Does anyone else want to say hello? Sorry, I know it's Zoom, so. Go ahead, Mary.
I'm very excited to welcome you to our community, Wade. And I think many people will be pleased that you've decided to sign on as our police chief.
Thank you, Mary. I look forward to it. It'll be great.
Wonderful.
Okay, that's great. Okay, go ahead. We're saying hello, and then we'll get back to the town manager report. Go ahead, Marcia.
Hello, welcome to Norwich, and I hope that you and Officer Ingram grow the department quickly.
Yes,
I can tell you that I will definitely do my best, Marcia.
All right, this is lovely. Thank you so much, sir. We're going to move on with our town manager report, but we look forward to as I alluded to having a more appropriate welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Rod, do you want to carry on?
Sure.
Do you have
Thank you, everyone. So moving on the staffing and recruitment question. So we're still seeking people to fill the equipment operator positions at Public Works. We've promoted Keith Waterman, who's the building and grounds technician, but also happens to hold a CDL license, into a position of equipment operator. He'll be ready to join us for the winter maintenance and snow plowing routes. We expect the new tractor that you approved the purchase of a couple of weeks ago to turn up within a week or so and be ready for winter work. And we interviewed a new candidate today for another equipment operator position. And we're working with neighboring towns on a kind of a contingency plan depending on how the winter unfolds. So that's the news on Public Works. You've just met the latest recruitment for the police department, and we are under contract with Robert Half for a replacement for the finance director who announced his resignation at the last select board meeting. And we have obtained the services of a finance director who will work primarily remotely, and her first day will be October 17th. So the handoff between finance and her is underway as we speak. We're just arranging a bunch of technical issues associated with that. So that's the update on staffing and recruitment. The next item on the town manager's report is connected to some extent with the change in the person in the seat of the finance director. So I'm recommending that the select board find time the next select board meeting, if not tonight, to make decisions about the two key elements of the master financial policy. One is the collateralization agreement, which is currently set, I believe, at $12 million, and puts the town in a difficult situation to process revenue as it's coming in the form of taxes. And we would, fielding the outgoing finance director felt strongly that this was an item that needed attention. And then the other one, which is also a serious concern, is the policy of how many people it needs to sign a check. Currently, it's just one, the treasurer, and we think that it would be a preferable setting to have 2 signatures out of a possible 3 to ensure that we've got adequate protections in place. So if people wanted to discuss that either now or at the next select board meeting, that's fine. And then lastly, I've spoken with Jen Myers. She's the new district advisor for property value, Vermont Tax Property and Valuation Office. And we discussed the letter that we've received from them, which requires us to be hopefully under contract with a provider for townwide appraisal services by the end of December of this year. And again, the advice was basically seek demonstration of the various software packages, and then the software packages are generally associated with companies that do townwide reappraisals, and then on the basis of the software solution that works best for the town's needs, select a vendor that goes with the software package. So again, we can discuss this a little bit now, or I think that the select board needs to make a quick decision because of the timelines involved on that matter. And then lastly, the radar signs that we ordered have turned up, and it's a question of locating them and installing them. There's a question as to whether it's worth installing them now before winter, when they're usually removed, so that they're not damaged by plows or other vehicles in snow conditions, versus setting them up in the spring.
So just a quick clarification. So I want the discussion about what to do, how to frame the agenda item for the reappraisal. I want that to come after or during the future agenda items. We had listed it. So let's if board members have questions for framing that for you, let's talk about it then. Similarly, I see Cheryl, if you have your hand up, if you want to make a comment about that, like I want to talk about it in that space because it's 7:37 and we unfortunately got behind. Otherwise, are there any questions for Rod? Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, I got a few questions. Under the staffing and recruitment, I was wondering if we got a refund of fees for Officer Ingram because she wasn't allowed to attend her second leadership course. And I'm also wondering, you didn't mention the loss of our tree warden. So I'm wondering if the board is going to do anything about that, because we've budgeted for aggressive action on the ash trees that are affected by the ash borer. So I thought that was kind of an important loss. And then I was kind of wondering about Rod's statement that the town treasurer has sole authority to set the level for collateralization agreement between the town and the bank. I don't know where that's found in statute. The only thing that I've found is that the treasurer, with the approval of a select board, can invest and reinvest monies. And that sort of agreement between approval of the select board and the treasurer was kind of gone over when I first came on the board under the prior town manager. So I don't think the treasurer has sole authority for that. And then the final thing is, I'm wondering, can Rod tell us which audits spoke to the issue of more than one signature on checks? Because I'm thinking we've got a lot of checks and balances in place in terms of the town managers signing off on the warrant, and then the board is reviewing it. So and then there's a little statement right on every warrant that says we direct that check be paid. So if those checks aren't being paid properly, that's a different issue. But I just wonder, are any other towns doing this? What's the standard protocol, and where did this come from?
So thank you, Marcia. So one, we're required by statute to make the appointment of a tree warden, so we need to take that up. So
Good.
So we have to do that. I think your just really quickly, your question about, I think Rod is here, he can answer, but I think it wasn't so much a reference to statute so much as what happens in Norwich by practice. So I think the possible, what you're talking about, I think indeed merits a future discussion. So I think we should, as Rod alludes to in the manager's report, it needs to be brought back, that matter, because indeed, where is that in statute? And what was your one other question? You wanted a clarification about where, if Rod knows or can find where the auditor's findings were for that matter?
Yeah.
Okay.
For signing of checks.
Rod, can you speak to the audit, or do you want more time to come back to us with that?
I'm gonna opt to come back with that. And I think that Marcia had another question on the refund for the police training. So we've submitted an application to get a refund. And I can't tell you whether we've received it or not. So, and then I want to separate out the question of the collateralization agreement. I think is the question contained not in statute, but in a master financial policy. And I'll get back to you on the audit question, but it's definitely been noted previously, and the current auditors have noted the practice of single authority for signature for a check writing is anomalous. So I'll get back to you.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Both of these issues were also brought up by Herb Durfee.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we do need to actually deal with.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay, thank you, Mary. Cheryl, as I alluded to, I want to, we're not really engaging in substantive discussion, but go ahead. Would you like to make a comment? Make your comment, please.
Yes, thank you. Cheryl Lindbergh, Town Treasurer, Norwich. And I am always open to have discussions about responsibilities as treasurer that may come under scrutiny. And I want to be clear that after 26 years of being the treasurer, that I look for best practices. And from all the audit reports that have been issued, it has never been brought to my attention that this is a concern of the audit. If the select board was aware of it, I wasn't made aware of it, and I haven't had the knowledge of this concern. But after all the years I've done this, and the way that the bills are paid and payroll is done, there is a lot of scrutiny to how it's done. And in the statement that is in the town manager's report, that there is no mechanism to ensure that the check is proper, is a surprise to me, because the invoice gets approved by the department head. It goes into payables through finance. I have no access to check stock. The warrant is reviewed and signed off by the town manager and finance office, and the select board reviews it and approves it and requests that the treasurer sign the checks for these bills to be paid. And when I go through and sign them, I take a last look at the invoice before I sign the check to make sure I don't see anything that might need to be corrected. So in addition, today I took the time to call around to my colleagues throughout the state of Vermont, and I got a very resounding no to the question of, do you require 2 signatures on checks at your municipality? I figured going beyond the school district and Dresden and the fire district was helpful, because that's too close to home. So I did, and I called my colleagues and individuals I don't know in Hartford, Thetford, Heartland, Randolph, Killington, Marshfield, and the last one I called was St. Johnsbury. And the response of the treasurer was, we used to do that, but our audit firm told us we no longer needed to do that because of the process of paying bills for the municipality and the controls that exist, which is exactly the controls that exist for the town of Norwich. And, the audit firm that they use is Sullivan and Powers. So I thought that was an interesting piece of information coming from St. Johnsbury. So that's what I wanted to share. And I feel very confident and comfortable with the way the process works, and would love to have future conversations about it with the select board at some point when you wish to talk further.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, next, anything further on the town manager's report? Rod, do you need any advice or thoughts from the board in terms of the question of the radar signs, or are you prepared to consult TRRC and other staff to make your decision? Okay.
Yes, we'll be consulting regional support and other staff. Yeah.
For the radar signs.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on if that's okay. Is that okay, board members?
Sounds good.
Okay, next is the Moore Lane Bridge, the approving of the material containment. Rod, do you want the opportunity to restate some of the points that you made in the most recent correspondence? Because I've noticed that some of these plainly stated and well articulated points that were made with the information from our state partners and our consultants, have not been the focus of our discussion so far. So can you just restate some of what was sort of part of correspondence, that so you can restate that as the most recent information and presentation from the town?
Sure, thank you, Roger. So just to give people some context. So I think that it's been suggested previously that the issue was first noticed in 2019 by Peter Orner, who lives next to the bridge. And in fact, I remember him contacting me, I think it was either a Friday or on a weekend, regarding the odor, when I was then employed as the planning director. And both the town manager, Herb Durfee, and the DPW director at the time, Larry Wiggins, were out of town. So I actually organized the fire department to check on the source of the odor, concerned that it might be a recent spill of gasoline product or something similar. And they were able to establish that it wasn't an immediate risk and that that wasn't the source of the odor. And then because it wasn't actually within my purview as the planning director, the situation concerning the bridge moved to the town manager's office and the DPW director's office. When I assumed the position of interim town manager in November or in September of 2021, the matter was still unresolved. There had been some effort at wrapping the bridge, the underside of the bridge, in a very large tarp, which was clearly ineffective. And Mr. Orner brought that to our attention. We responded, and he also brought it to the attention of the state, I understand. We then started a communication with the Department of Environmental Conservation with regard to the substance that was leaking from the bridge and what steps needed to be taken. We received an initial letter from the state requiring us to respond, and in ongoing discussion with the spills program from the Department of Environmental Conservation, the issue was determined to be urgent because the material making its way to the water, which is what the Department of Environmental Conservation has regulatory control over, was regarded as an unpermitted, an unpermitted substance making its way to the water. So without a permit, it can't make its way to the water. We didn't have a permit for it because it was a spill. The requirements that were set in place were, for the first time at that point, the material had not been characterized from a chemical standpoint prior to that. So we paid Murray and Masterson, engineering and a spill specialist company that's registered to work in Vermont, to analyze the substance and provide us with a report. They provided the same report to the state. That report forms the basis of the state's response, and it's the state's response that we're actually implementing. It's not a formal requirement of the state. The state is actually advising us. We are not being compelled by the state. We have not received a letter officially notifying us that we have to take specific steps. However, we are working cooperatively with the Department of Environmental Conservation to ensure, as far as practical, that the emulsion material does not make its way to the brook. The general view of our engineering specialists and Murray and Masterson and others, including the DPW director, who has had a long career in hazardous waste management, is that although it's not ideal, a containment structure of the design that we went out to bid for, and which we are attempting to approve tonight, is the best short-term solution. We don't have the opportunity of not making a short-term solution. The state is requiring us to make a short-term solution. The definition of short-term solution is that you have to do it now. The definition of a long-term solution would be the discussion that the town as a whole would need to have about the future of the bridge. So it doesn't matter even if the town was somehow able to make a decision in January about the future of the bridge. We still need to do something between today and January. So this is the temporary response that the state is compelling us to provide, regardless of how soon we can make a long-term decision. The range of options for a long-term decision are apparent. It is remove the bridge deck and replace it with a new one, remove the bridge deck and leave no bridge there at all, remove the existing vehicular bridge deck and replace it with a smaller bridge deck designed purely for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. None of those options have been discussed by the community. There's no information as to the relative costs, including the removal of the existing bridge deck, which is now hazardous materials because of the emulsion product, which is now coated on the wooden deck of the bridge. So there are costs associated with its demolition and removal, and there are costs associated with its replacement. We don't have any of that information at hand, and so it would be unfair and improper to ask the town to make a decision about the future of the bridge without some of that information being available. because that's complex information and it will take a while to accumulate, there obviously isn't going to be a really significant decision on the future of the bridge within the next couple of months. Even if there was a decision to remove the bridge, there's still a time that it would need to pass between removal of the bridge deck and then getting the permits in place, working with the state, and then organizing a contractor to actually do it. It could be as long as 2 years from now before you could get somebody to do the work. So regardless of what's happening now, a temporary short-term measure needs to be in place. That's what the state's insisting on.
Okay.
That's what the design is that was being called for.
Okay.
On the nature of the material, the information that I provided in the packet in response to questions from Peter Orner include the emulsion product identified is a hazardous material, but not a hazardous waste product. It is not illegal, and it is not listed as a toxic substance. The emulsion product has an unpleasant odor, but there's very little release of volatile organic compounds to the air or leaching contaminants to the underlying stream bed and brook. And as noted by Mr. Orner earlier, the State Department of Environmental Conservation does not regulate air quality in this regard. The characteristics of the emulsion are less mobile and it has less solubility than other hazardous materials. We've talked about the temporary structure, which we're, as I said, compelled to construct, no matter how short a time frame that it's going to be in place for. And I think that the key that I want to emphasize here is that obviously, given the complexity of the setting, we can't guarantee that there's not going to be any further leaks, but the idea is that we're trying to minimize, as far as practical, any leaks. We know that the behavior of the bridge in winter is dramatically different from summer, that as the weather gets colder, the material sets up more like a solid and doesn't leak because it freezes, basically. And then so we're hoping that in the intervening 5 or 6 months when the containment structure is in place, there won't be any leaks to the brook. And then in the spring, in addition to the containment structure, other measures will be implemented to reduce the amount of stormwater infiltration through the bridge deck by replacing the pavement on top of the bridge, and in particular, replacing the broken and poor condition sidewalk on the edge of the bridge. And that we're hoping that these measures, in combination with maintenance and frequent observation, will likely lead to a reduction in the amount of emulsion material making its way to the brook, acknowledging that if material does begin to make its way to the brook, that the town still needs to act to deal with it, and that should give us the time frame for a more sustained decision-making process. And it would be expected that this item will be a feature of the budget discussions and a feature of the upcoming town meeting warrant. But that's the earliest I think you could reasonably expect the people of the town to make a decision about the future of the bridge. On that point, and then lastly, I don't know the history of the bridge. It's obvious Moore Lane is obviously a very small street. It's a connector between Beaver Meadow and Turnpike Road. A discussion of the future of the bridge as a vehicular bridge would need to include some kind of accounting for emergency vehicle access and the possibility that if one road was, for whatever reason, closed off, imagine Beaver Meadow was impacted by flood, for instance, that the traffic from Beaver Meadow may want to use Moore Lane temporarily and to then drive onto Turnpike Road as a way of accessing the village if that section of Beaver Meadow that's just east of Moore Lane, which is low, is impacted by flooding, for instance. So there's reasons why you might not want to totally eliminate vehicular access on the Moore Lane Bridge, but that's a discussion for the town to have at some subsequent point.
Okay, thank you, Red. I would like to actually get a motion on the table before we continue our discussion, if that's okay.
All right. I move to authorize the town manager to accept the bid from Winterset to construct a temporary containment system to prevent hazardous materials from entering the stream at the Moore Lane Bridge for an amount not to exceed $62,000 to be paid from the Bridge Reserve Fund.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Go ahead, Mary. Did you have a discussion point or a question?
Yes, just on if we vote to install the containment system, will our DPW director be responsible for monitoring the levels of waste inside the containment system, and how would it be drawn off?
Right.
And how would it be monitored?
These are good questions. So the design currently calls for it being a plywood structure, basically bolted to the underside of the bridge deck, the wooden bridge deck. And somewhat oddly, in the world of spill management, there are things called diapers. Basically, there'll be a woven nylon product that'll be some thickness that will be sandwiched between the bottom of the bridge deck and the plywood, and it will have some degree of absorbency, and its job is to actually absorb the emulsion material if it passes through the bridge. Because there'll be pressure, there'll be a way in which the emulsion will be unable to pass all the way through, so it should sit basically in between the pieces of wood and held in place by this diaper, which will then be attached to the plywood. So the theory goes that there will be some movement and some ebb and flow, but it's expected that both the plywood and the diaper will be absorptive enough to hold a large amount of the emulsion. If it turns out that there are areas where the emulsion leaks through, then there'll be secondary measures intended to catch it. The weak spots include where the bridge deck attaches to the concrete abutments. And then there's been discussion about how to deal with that, which would include basically making a gutter and then capturing the emulsion in its liquid form in summer, and then moving that to a container beside the concrete bridge abutment. Under those circumstances, there will be a significant operation and maintenance issue there, and we need to work that through. But the hope here is that the design as proposed will basically hold and prevent the material from passing through the bridge deck, and that it will stay in a somewhat static state.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that.
Okay.
Having, dealt with diapers and other absorbent pads, etc. I would think that the pad would have a capacity, so perhaps this would buy us a certain amount of time. Like winter buys us a certain amount of time because the material will congeal to a bit. But I do think that it would be nice to know how the company rates this. Is this buying us 6 months of time? Is this buying us 8 months of time? They might not be able to answer that, but that absorbent material is definitely going to have a capacity. And it's unclear to me, how soon that capacity will be used up.
That's a good question, and I think that the answer is that we're unfortunately participating in something of an experiment here. But the industry response to these products is that they're effective. But we can't.
You can't answer that, I don't think. Yeah.
So go ahead, Aaron. You were next.
I have sort of two questions related. One is, can you explain why we can't do something to seal the top side sooner than spring? It seems like that is something that's more on the side of solution than remediation. And then the other is, given that it's something of an experiment and we don't know how long the diaper will hold out, does it make sense to have the collection system installed when we're building it to begin with, rather than waiting till it fails to put in the collection system? Or maybe you can't design it until you see how it fails. I don't know the answer to that.
Your second point is, we need to see how it's going to work and then respond to it. And then the first question on the paving is that we're already kind of at the end of the paving season. Generally, the plants are winding up or pretty much done by Thanksgiving, and we are not in a situation to mobilize and replace it. in that short
What
period.
about just like sealing cracks, tarring cracks or caulking edges, or maybe that wouldn't be effective. I don't know, but
I'm happy to bring that up with the DPW director. The cracks, the crack sealing is a little bit similar to the paving stuff, but in terms of the weather, but we should certainly look at that. I think the single biggest issue actually, looking at having spent as much time under the bridge as I have in the last 5 months, there's a sidewalk on the eastern side of the bridge, which is basically just slatted, timber slats, almost like decking on your house, and it's crumbling. And there's a lot of sand and soil and weeds growing through it, and the soil stays wet all the time. And so if you get down underneath the bridge and look where the material's leaking through, it's consistent with the sidewalk. So the sidewalk is the major point of failure, and then there's a couple of other significant points of failure where the paving meets the edge of the bridge deck on both sides. So we're not in a situation to replace the sidewalk now, and we would want to make a monolithic single paved surface for the entire bridge to prevent flow through of infiltration of stormwater. And so there's some design questions there, as well as mobilizing our forces right now.
Okay, then lastly, what do we have for a design process for at the spring so that we can get on that before it gets hot?
The expectation is that over the winter we will formulate the bid for repaving, and that will include a design to address the removal of the crumbling sidewalk and replace it with basically the same paving material as the road surface.
Is that the town sidewalk?
Yeah. It's all, this is the other key question here. I think there's an expectation that somehow the state's going to help out here. I think that's unrealistic. So it's a not insignificant expense all the way around.
Okay, Marcia, you had just really quickly, it's 8:04. We have folks here for an agenda item at 8:10, and we still have another agenda item before that. So I just want to bring our attention to that. But yes, go ahead, Marcia.
Okay, so I'll jump to the big gorilla, which is the feds. CERCLA is what's usually referred to as the super fund, and in the 40 USC. It describes which chemicals are hazardous waste, and the 3 that are listed in this report are reportable, and they have to be reported at certain poundage. When I look at the spill report from the state, it says that the quantity is unknown. So what I'm concerned about is why we haven't been measuring the spillage to see if we have met the threshold that the feds would require us to be reporting. And also, I'm very interested in what Kate White mentioned as us being a licensed effluent spiller. I want to know more about that. And I think that the town select board, as being responsible by law for the highways and the maintenance of them, and this bridge being part of a highway, we need to really take a little more time to investigate whether we need this. And I'm very worried about spending money on something that's actually going to not help anything, but could potentially cause us more harm, both to people and to our fiscal life.
Thank you, Marcia. So just to be clear, we don't have the luxury to take more time to study the issue more clearly because we're obligated to respond. And then I want to say quickly, Marcia, we have no report from the state. That is from our contractor, the testing from Murray and Madison. I think that's what you're referring to. But Rod, I want to address Marcia's points. We haven't received that letter. We haven't received a letter from the state, but the DEC is interested in monitoring our construction. Can you speak a little bit more about how we are interacting with our regulator, who has regulatory authority over this? Can you speak to that so Marcia's concerns are addressed?
Yes. So my understanding, Marcia, is that if there was some kind of threshold that we have already broken, or if there was a threshold that we're required to demonstrate that we hadn't broken, that would have been part of the communication that we've had with the regulator, that is the Department of Environmental Conservation Spills Program. So we've had ongoing communication with the spills program. We've not yet received a letter requiring a plan to be put in place or a specific response, and we've not been listed or any way been required to identify as a permitted waste generator, I think is the terminology that Kate White used. So all I can say at this point is that we have continued to work with Murray and Masterson. We've continued to consult with Stantec, our engineering company that's also got a background in these issues, and we've continued to work with the spills program of DEC in a cooperative way, and we're attending to the issues that have been raised. And the key here is that we are required to come up with a temporary result. The plastic strapped to the bottom of the bridge deck was an initial solution. We all understand that that was very temporary, and it also had serious limitations in terms of its design. We all acknowledge that from the get-go, but that in and of itself, which was not a small expense, was intended to satisfy the immediate demands of the Department of Environmental Conservation. And so we continue to work with them to come up with solutions. I don't believe they're necessarily convinced that this step is going to work, but in response to questions and further clarification from me, they understand and accept that under the circumstances, this is the best measure that we can take under very challenging circumstances. And if it's not adequate, then we're going to have to try harder. That's all we know for now, and that's all we can know. And I keep on emphasizing that there is no way that you can eliminate the issue like in a week or something like that. It's not. And so they're still insisting on a temporary solution, which is, and this is the next step in the temporary solution.
All right, I see two hands. As I alluded to earlier, we're over time, so I want to take these public comments and then remind board members that we have a motion on the table. So go ahead, Peter Orner. Peter?
Kate White was first, so I'm going to defer to Kate White being first. Thank you.
I appreciate that you don't get to choose who's called on.
Kate White had her hand up first.
So Peter, I'm calling on you. I'm calling on you to speak. I would like you to do that, sir. If you don't want to speak, then I'm happy to take Kate White's comment and move on with our agenda. Can you please? I'm inviting you to address the board.
Roger, I've been in touch with the Department of Environmental Conservation for over 2 years. I know for a fact that they're very dubious of this plan and that they would certainly give us more time to discuss this. Furthermore, the Department of Environmental Conservation will be happy to attend the meeting to discuss this publicly. And I think because it is a public health issue, that frankly, with all respect to Roger and Rod, you don't have any public health expertise, right? And Roger, I say this very directly, you are the town health officer. I received an email from you that says as follows: a health officer has not been called upon by the DEC to provide assistance, investigate, or address the complaint further. That is an inaccurate statement. Sarah Vos, the state toxicologist, is meeting with the Department of Environmental Conservation this week to discuss this issue. The EPA, the federal EPA's opened a case file on what's happening under the bridge. I am not confident, frankly, in the response that the town has had, and so I've had to go in different directions to get some answers. But what I'm asking for you all tonight is hold on, because the final thing is that Rod is saying short term it has to be done. Is there documentation for this? No, Rod said very directly, there isn't. The state is not demanding an answer on this problem tonight, and they're willing to come and discuss this issue with us. Furthermore, the Department of Environmental Conservation does not deal with public health and is conferring this week with public health authorities in the state of Vermont. So I'm asking, if you accept the bid, you lock us in legally to a contract, which you may decide to do down the line, but I'm asking for you to respect the fact that more information is forthcoming. And the final thing I will say is that I've been pretty patient, 4 years of this, watching this beautiful brook outside this window polluted knowingly by the town of Norwich. It's time for us to address this. Now, I understand it's a complicated problem, and I don't blame Rod. You know, I know he's doing the best he can. The plastic didn't even work for 1 day. So you guys are throwing money at a problem that isn't solving it. So I am very, very dubious, as is James Donaldson of the Department of Environmental Conservation, that this contraption that you are all designing is going to work. And frankly, do you have any evidence that other structures like this have worked in the past? So I'm imploring you, give us a little time, give the time to the state toxicologist to tell us exactly what chemicals we're dealing with. And I really appreciate that. We are over residential levels on certain chemicals. What does that in fact mean? I've been asking and asking and asking. If Rod could give me an answer, because that's not coming from the DEC. That's coming from the independent report. So anyway, there's so much more. And again, I understand it's late. I understand it's a problem. You know, you have other things you want to get to, but I really appreciate this. Of course, it's, you know, this is a public health issue, and I just asking for some more time here. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate White, I think you are next. Or I'm calling.
Yes, I just kind of want to second. I want to second Mr. Orner's comments. Looking at the letters from Mr. Donaldson from the Vermont DEC, it's his language that I used when it says that the town is not permitted at this point to discharge hazardous materials, and that they would have to apply for that license, and that really concerns me. But really, let's take a pause on this temporary solution. I don't want to spend town money that could be spent for something else on a solution that we then leave in place for many years saying, well, we've got a partial solution. Now we don't want to take the trouble to do the real hard discussion, which is what to do about the bridge and the continuing pollution that's coming from it. So what I would recommend is take a pause now, wait till we hear from the toxicologist. And second, begin that process of open discussion with people about the alternatives that were mentioned by the town manager, so that many people can take part in this discussion. It's not limited to a small group of people. I'm feeling concerned about the transparency that I've seen in this issue, and I don't think it's representative of most of the people of Norwich who prefer to be open and above board and sharing information with each other, especially regarding an issue of hazardous waste.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, go ahead, Stuart Richards.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. So I really appreciate the information that both Peter and Kate have given us. And I think it's an important decision. I might add that I do live on Blood Brook, and I am really concerned with the toxicology and the dangers, given that I have some grandchildren that like to swim in the brook and like to walk in the brook and like to be in the brook. So I think a longer term solution is really in order. And I'm curious when Rod says that the environmental folks in the state are compelling us to do this short-term solution. Is there documentation? Is there a letter from the state that says we have to act by a certain date? I would appreciate an answer to that one. If there's not a letter that compels us to do something by a certain date, then I think we really should take more time to try and understand the problem and come up with a more permanent solution. Putting a Band-Aid on this is just not a good idea. So thank you very much.
Board members, do you have any other final thoughts before I call the question? Go ahead, Mary.
I think it would be irresponsible not to try to contain the substance. I also think it would be irresponsible, you know, if we do vote for this containment structure, to not start a process of getting going on a permanent solution. And it seems unknown as far as, how much absorbency the solution will have, but we just have to not lose track of it. I'm inclined to vote to contain because I think it is, an unknown, unpermitted substance. So it would be irresponsible not to contain it. Plus, we have to contain it. But I also think that we do have to think about ultimate solutions. So that's where I'm at on this.
Okay, Marcia.
I think that if we could just wait another 2 weeks, when I look at the spill report here, I'm looking at it right now. There's actions taken. It's a recitation of what we've done rather than any sort of direction to do anything. And I think we're stabbing in the dark and spending a lot of money. So while I agree that containment is important, I think that if we waited 2 more weeks and made a really concerted effort to get some more information, we're not doing any more damage than we've done in the last 2, 3, 4 years.
Marcia, what do you think the benefit of 2 more weeks or any other time would solve?
Did you hear what Peter Orner was saying about the people at the state level and the EPA are involved in?
So
we might look some more.
Regardless of what we may learn or don't learn about the toxicology report of the water and the soil, which, by the way, it hasn't been embedded into the soil and there hasn't been large traces found in the surface waters. But if we were to do additional testing by additional agencies, that wouldn't change what we have to do to the bridge. It would just still be a bridge that's there. And we've been explained to on multiple occasions the challenges with just flat out. 2 weeks wouldn't do anything. I'm sure we will get more information. I'm sure the DEC is going to love to offer advice on our containment structure, and we will talk about it when they do. But what would the benefit of time do? You haven't. You were asking rhetorical questions, so either answer for the board or I'll call on Aaron.
It's not a rhetorical question. I think basically that we could also get some information on how much it would cost to take down the bridge and whether we could accomplish it in the next month or 2.
I mean, I think this bridge was identified in previous capital item reports. So you're looking at, we're not having that. I don't even know what to say. Aaron, I'll take your public comment and then I need to move us along on this agenda item.
Yeah. No, I was just going to repeat
public comment. Your comment. I'm sorry.
Repeat what you were saying. That there is no evidence. No one is suggesting any alternative methods of containment, and there's no question of removing the bridge in the short, month or 2, even, let alone a matter of weeks. So I don't see that we have any other. More public health information won't get us anywhere in terms of actually containing the discharge. So we don't have any choice. We have to try to contain the discharge. I don't love the plan, but there's no other option.
If look, like if board members wish to wait, if they wish to push it off, or if you wish to approve the expenditure with an understanding that you'll wait on something, you can, we have a motion on the table, right? So if we need to do something differently to amend that motion or to make it contingent on an action or what have you, then, this is our work, right? This is the space. Do you understand what I just said?
If you're talking to me, I definitely understand what you said.
Okay, I'm talking to the group. Okay. So we have a motion on the table, right? So what do you want to do with the motion on the table? I
suggest you call it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Call a question.
Okay. I'm going to do that. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Got 3 public hands, Roger.
Thank you. I'll roll call. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Aaron, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mary?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
No.
And I'm a yes. Okay. That's the motion. Rob, so now you have an authorization, you'll take our authorization under advisement, right? What are you going to move on this? Okay. So when, in light of our discussion, when do you expect to begin the work on this? Is there anything is there anything that are you moving at a deliberate pace? Are you living at an immediate pace? And what pace can we expect from you on this? Or would you prefer?
One of the factors that was prompting the choice of the bid response that we sought approval on was that they are available basically now, whereas the other respondent was only available sometime in the future, some months away. So that being said, I'll take the discourse that's happened here under advisement.
Okay. I'm going to take Mary Gorman's hand because she hasn't had an opportunity to speak. And then respectfully, I need to move on and I'll look to my board members for support on that. So go ahead, Mary Gorman.
I just want to say that I think that the town residents have done so much more work in looking into solutions and looking into the details of this than our town board and our select board. And it appears that there could be some, shocking that it's been going on for so long and that we are now in a crunch position to spend or perhaps waste money on a temporary solution that will likely not work. And I want to just acknowledge Peter and others who have been working diligently in the ways that we need to be working when we have a very serious health concern in the town. And I think shame on the town manager. And it's this is a sad moment for Norwich, Vermont.
Great. Thank you, Mary. All right. I'm Colleen Fox. You haven't had an opportunity to speak, so go ahead.
Okay. Colleen Fox, 308 Beaver Meadow Road. I live just above the bridge. It's unfortunate that I wasn't able to speak before you called your vote, but I just wanted to share how disheartened I was to hear the board members say that this was an option that they weren't happy about, but that they're going to pay that much money for. I mean, that in itself, would you hire a contractor for your house that you didn't think had a great solution, but it's the one you have in front of you? That's all I want to say, because it's very disheartening to see board members making that type of choice.
Thank you, Colleen. Okay. This is so, Rod. One thing I do want to follow up on, and then I'll ask for final comments, and then from the board members, and then we'll move on. Is as Mr. Orner indicated, I'm still have some fringe health officer duties. We made a recommendation to the state and to other people. The paperwork has been filed, but in the meantime, it's me. The chair is appointed in the absence of an appointee, right? So what I had said, that this is not a public recreational area, nor is it a public drinking water, to my knowledge, and that I was under the understanding that the DEC would be would be working with a health officer. So is there any other state offices at this time that need to be contacted? Is there an expectation that the DEC would be in contact with them and then thus inform the town? Can you talk a little? Obviously, the spills are in the regulatory authority of the DEC, but is there any other state actors that we should be expecting to hear from? For example, as a health officer locally, I understood that the DEC would be contacting me if they needed testing, which obviously they did not contact. So is there Vermont Department of Health or any other state agencies that that should be contacting us, or that the state would be contacting or conferring with?
James Donaldson has not made me aware of any other state agency with jurisdiction or the likelihood that some other state agency would take an action here.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other board member final comments? And then we do need to move on, if that's okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is to appoint the zoning administrator. Can we actually just begin with a motion?
I move to appoint Aaron Dinamar as zoning administrator effective October 13th, 2022.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Aaron, we receive a recommendation from the Planning Commission and we appoint, and that's what we're doing this evening. You may remember that this discussion was a topic of conversation. We received legal advice. That legal advice has been placed into the packet. So Aaron, you're here with us. Do you want to show your screen and say hello? We haven't had the opportunity to meet you, so we should do that. Hi.
Hello. Sorry, I'm here.
Hello.
Aaron.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further discussion from board members? Go ahead, Marcia.
So I'm just wondering, I'm totally confused about who is now, what titles exist in the planning office? Is there a director, a coordinator, an administrator? I'm lost. Can you tell me what are the titles and who holds those roles?
Sure, Rod can help us out. Go ahead, Rod.
Hello. So Aaron is the planning and zoning coordinator. I still have the position of zoning administrator. The position that was the planning and zoning director has been replaced by the position that Aaron is in, and he has the title of planning and zoning coordinator. There is no director position anymore.
Okay.
And we're here to appoint a zoning administrator, which Aaron will hold.
That's correct.
Okay. No. So I understood Rod was the administrator, so now he won't be. What are we going to have going forward?
If you elect to appoint Aaron as a zoning administrator, then he will replace me as zoning administrator.
So then we'd have one position, an administrator and no coordinator?
Marcia, do you want us to take a step back and explain how the zoning administrator interacts with the planning office, like more broadly? Is that what you're asking? We've like Rod has been the planning director, and then he is the zoning administrator, right? And now we have a planning coordinator and we have a zoning administrator.
Correct. So the planning and zoning coordinator will fulfill the function of zoning administrator, which is a title and a position that is established under statute. And when you have land use regulations, as Norwich does, it's typical that you have a zoning administrator, and it's the role of the select board to appoint that person.
Okay, so you are the planning and zoning administrator?
No, I'm currently the town manager, and I'm also the zoning administrator. The proposal here is to make Aaron, whose title is planning and zoning coordinator, be the zoning administrator. And then I would step down from that role. So he would replace me as the zoning administrator and perform the functions of the planning and zoning coordinator, which would include being zoning administrator.
I mean, short of having sort of a flow chart, that's what the legal memo is like advising, right? Because you've had these questions in the past.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just making sure it's been like moving targets.
Yes, and we thank all of the moving targets for doing the jobs so well for us, and we're wonderful to have a sense of permanency now with Aaron. Any other board member questions or discussions, or I'll call the question. All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aaron, for sticking with us for this agenda item. And welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have a break and then we have an executive session. So why don't we it's 8:31. Why don't we come back at 8:36, if that's okay? And then we'll have our executive session. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, 8:36. See you soon. Can I begin? Can I get a motion?
Yes. I move to find that premature general public knowledge of attorney-client communications between the select board and town attorney as to matters for which legal advice is sought would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage by disclosing privileged communications and waiving attorney-client privilege to discuss the pending BCA appeal in Katucki versus Town of Norwich.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Unanimous. Okay.
Yeah, the second part. I move to enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A 1F for the purposes of considering confidential attorney-client advice and to invite the town's attorney and the town manager to discuss a pending BCA appeal and to discuss Katucki versus Town of Norwich.
Okay, a second.
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I'll move folks into the waiting room for this. agenda here. Next is the consent agenda. So when we make a motion for the consent agenda, we approve the AP warrant, we accept the draft meeting minutes, and we receive correspondence. We could have a discussion. There's time for discussion for all of those things in the one motion of the consent agenda. Okay.
All right. Well, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
So I wanted to discuss the letters from Peggy Bagdoyan, Tracy Hayes, Tracy Katucki, and Waterfall, Bill Scabone. I think that's
what do you want to say about them? Go ahead.
I wanted to say that I was interested lately in the news from Lebanon about their program, the volunteer program. And so notwithstanding the appointment of a new chief, I think we have a long way to go towards police department recovery. And I'd like to work with the chief and Officer Ingram to investigate the Lebanon PD's version of the National Volunteers and Police Service Program. The description on their website is the program will help increase police responsiveness, service delivery, and information input and provide new program opportunities. Volunteers will assist sworn and non-sworn staff in the police department with various tasks, such as community services activities, clerical duties, homeless outreach and response, traffic control, animal control, vacant house checks, fingerprints, etc. I'm just thinking that that might address some of the issues that we have, like school crossing guards, and it kind of gets us towards that thing we've been discussing about more sort of police versus non-police services for servicing people, and might be worth learning what Lebanon is doing.
Sure. So, okay. So thank you, Marcia. So the way that I'm going to just handle this is that you're responding to or having a discussion on something that someone raised. I'm not looking to take any action on the points you raised, but I will, we've all heard them. So I think people should take that under advisement, and Rod is hearing it as well too. So he could bring the Lebanon program to people's attention.
Right.
Okay.
And Lindbergh's letter I also wanted to bring up. I think we do need to make a decision about that software and get going. The plan for reappraisal is due by the 9th. I know we're going to talk about that later, but I think we've got to really get moving.
Okay.
It's 2 letters. There's Bill Scavone. We heard a lot from him tonight, though.
Yeah, he was interested in the same stuff, right?
I mean, I think one of the things that really needs to happen with Guile Mountain is we've put into the budget, right? The budget approved, right, for the parking lot expansion, and it has not risen to, get on the workload for lots of good reasons. So the board has budgeted funds to in part to address it. So we just need to reprioritize it as part of a workload, but obviously not now. So I'll say that really quickly. It's budgeted. The parking lot expansion is budgeted.
I was thinking we should just close the trail during foliage season. But that's just apropos of nothing because we don't have an agenda item. But
yes,
maybe we could get Advanced Transit to run a shuttle.
Yeah, we talked about that at one point, to have shuttles, vans or something.
Who regulates fire towers in the state of Vermont? That's what I want to know. Anyway, okay, because obviously, time to talk about liability. That thing is, God knows. Okay, thank you, Marcia. Everyone.
All the letters.
You had others that you wanted to raise.
No, that was it.
Okay.
They all had that theme about policing and problems.
That's true.
Yeah, I had written to Tracy Hayes just separately in my individual capacity to let her know that the crossing guard continues to be budgeted, and how long it's been advertised and where it's been advertised. So, and we have, Rod, I understand we have no applications to date. Is that right? So I would say that this is like a good, there was a real sense that this community could, rally for, an institution like Dan and Witt's, right? I would similarly suggest that, it's a job that people can rally and hold. But we're advertising for the crossing guards. Okay. So any further discussion on the consent agenda? All right. With that in mind, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right, the future agenda items. Do you want to, we'll go 11A, is that right? I mean, yeah. I think it's just so I think there's this question of like making sure that the town's broad needs on software considerations, which go beyond that one office, are considered. And so it's been the suggestion very recently in the most recent town manager report. And then when we last were discussing and responding to the one bid that we had received a few months back, that we, consider the software work. So I think at this point, because it affects other departments, this board needs to do the work of finding more about the software and go from there. So I think in terms of framing the agenda item, that is like, that's part of the framing. So we need to do that before we hear from, perhaps before we do an RFP to reappraise, because do board members have any other thoughts on that framing of like a future approach?
Well, I think Rod was talking about having the town make an effort to contact the vendors and vet some of this out.
Yeah.
To sort of expedite it. Yeah. So if that could be done, it's also a very tight time frame, I think.
So let me take Marcia's comment, Mary, and then like ask Rod about, how we would go about that if that's something we wanted to do. Go ahead, Marcia.
So I'm just mindful, in my past work life, you have a big sandbox of software where loads of people are having to play in that same sandbox. So I'd like to be sure that we've identified all the people who need to play in the box and have them involved from the get-go so that we minimize any surprises or work issues that one office doesn't know because they don't do the office work in some other place. So I really want to make sure that this is a cohesive effort.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other thoughts on this question, introducing the idea of like having a conversation on software and what town offices it affects other than the listers is sort of what we're discussing. All right, go ahead, Mary, and then I'll ask Rod a little bit about some technical approaches to how to do this.
Just sort of a question, assuming that we sorted out which software was appropriate, I would imagine there will be a learning curve for everyone learning it. And then there's the actual sort of schedule of reassessment. So that's just something I'd want to learn about as we go along, those timeframes. If you have completely new software, everybody has to learn it, right?
Right.
And plus we've got this need to, do a significant amount of work that'll affect the timetable, so.
Okay. So Rod, you had mentioned this idea of inviting, trying to sort of hearing a demonstration or learning more about like the software and how it affects other departments, or if it affects other departments. Like, how do we do that in the confines of an agenda item? Like, how do we begin that work, meaningfully and quickly, right?
So let me just clear up a couple of issues here to start with. Thank you, Roger. So the primary purpose of the software is to facilitate the town assessor and the staff doing the company that you hire to do the townwide reappraisal to do their work. So think of it as a very large database that does very specific things with regard to making appraisals possible. And some of the features vary from software manufacturer to software manufacturer. Without wanting to get into too much of the technical background of it, I'm sure that Cheryl can give you more detail. But each one of these products has different pros and cons. The way it works is that the company that's going to do the reappraisal is going to want to use a specific software platform, and then that software platform becomes the property of the town. The town subscribes to that software platform for the period of time until another townwide reappraisal is conducted, or you choose that you don't want to work with that software vendor anymore. So the context for this is a little different from in previous years, because there was a long-term relationship between NIMRIC and the state of Vermont tax department providing the grand list, and the state of Vermont tax department has gone out in the last year or so and had a very large-scale project, which has resulted in a different vendor providing the statewide grand list, and it's structured in a very different way. And there's sort of new protocols with its use. This means that if you like, the natural advantage of working inside NIMRIC to some extent has faded away. The town hasn't been using NIMRIC for that work anyway, but it just means that the landscape of software considerations is different from in past years. The interaction between that software, and that's the domain of the assessor and the listers, with other town programs, is pretty limited, but there are accessory features, including mapping and being able to gain information about individual properties in the town that vary from product to product, and there will be other people that will try and make use of that. So there'll be some, if you like, ancillary aspects of the program that will be useful for the planning and zoning office, and there's certainly going to be some aspects of it that are useful for the finance office, but in a fairly minimal way. And I wouldn't want to claim that the knowledge or the input of those offices is necessarily going to be an important factor here. It's more just that you need to pay attention to, if you like, what the feature set for the software is. Some of it is better than others. I think the key thing here that I'm actually thinking of mapping functions and being able to actually display information about each individual property in an effective way with an interactive map. So increasingly, using a phone or something similar to gain information that may have previously been, required to visit the town offices or something and view listers cards or something similar. So it's more those features, I think, that are of interest to the other offices of the town. And then I think that an awareness of how the public can use it and how it could smooth workflow for other town departments. Again, going back to my experience in planning and zoning, if you could direct people to an interactive website so that they can obtain information about a property without having to ask a person to go look at it, go look at the files, then it's a huge efficiency gain for planning and zoning, and to some extent the person, if they know that they can just do it with their phone. So these are the sorts of features. The key here is that there are 4 or 5 providers that I identified. If you contact them and seek demonstrations, which most likely would happen remotely, then the listers, the town assessor, and other key staff can begin the process of reviewing how those products work. And then you'd have a sense of which product you preferred, and therefore maybe which vendor to do the townwide reappraisal you wanted to work with, given that different software goes with different reappraisal companies.
Okay, so Rod, all of that is good information and generally, something to agree with. But I think the thing that we're coming up against, which maybe you could address a little bit, and we can then turn to the listers, is we have this December date, right, that Marcia alluded to also, a plan that a contract, right, is in place with someone to have a plan to complete a reappraisal. So not necessarily having completed a reappraisal, but like be in an agreement, in order to demonstrate to the state that we are, doing that work as now mandated. So how can we sort of do what might be this necessary or even productive work that you were referencing, and that I think we have general agreement on as a good thing with that deadline? Do you think the demonstrations could just be done very quickly and expediently? Okay.
I would say that you can start doing the demonstrations and draft an RFQ, have an RFQ, and I would emphasize that the RFQ should be very simple and very basic. It should not be a complex document, and it should propose to establish what the costs would be for a provider to provide the software and to do the townwide reappraisal in the most basic way possible, and then issue the RFQs to each of the vendors that you're interested in reviewing the products of. Right. And so each of them would know that they're being considered as a possible vendor, and that the demonstration will be part of that process. And then if they're interested in submitting a response to the RFQ, then they can do that. But basically, I'm suggesting that not to pursue the RFP that's been developed by the listers because of the complexity of that document, and it doesn't fit the needs now.
Okay. Well, we're not considering that. We're just trying to figuring out how to frame this discussion for the future. Okay. But thank you. Okay, Marcia, go ahead.
So if selection of the software is going to determine the selection of the appraiser, and if, as I remember from the prior discussions, appraisers are not,
we lost you for a little bit.
Do we have the luxury, even though it would be, preferable to go through that process, or are we now in a situation where we're so close to the deadline, we have to look at who's available and then take that software, understanding what you said, that at the next time we have an appraisal, there'll probably be a different software anyway. So I'm just thinking maybe we're too late and we have to look at who's available and deal with the software.
That actually is that's a plausible scenario. I mean, you may be confronting that choice, in which case, if you can only find one vendor that's going to be responsive, and they come with their own software, then, I need to think about how you would shape that in terms of your procurement policies and the master financial policy. But basically, yeah, you might be, that I think that, like I said, it's a plausible scenario at this point.
I think we're so close, we have to look at that.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Aaron.
So if I'm understanding you, you're suggesting not evaluating the software independently of vendors beforehand and then going and seeking a vendor who matches that software, but rather using the vendor to be the way to evaluate the software. So we would go ahead and look to all the vendors that might respond. And then if more than one responds, we compare their different softwares and pick the best one. That seems to me that's all we can do anyway, is look at all the vendors that currently exist and use software, and then using software as one of the ways to evaluate them just is common sense. So it seems to me what you're suggesting, we just move forward with trying to find a vendor.
Basically, the way you're going to learn about the software is the vendor is going to introduce you to or demonstrate the software. So there's more than one vendor for each of the software products, or at least there's a couple of vendors that share some of the software products. Again, Cheryl's kind of got more knowledge here, but there's a handful of different software platforms, and there's a handful of vendors. You will learn about the software because the vendors will come and demonstrate it to you. The software that you like the best, that does the best job, and maybe here a factor to consider is if they promise that they can be under contract with you by December, then maybe that's when you structure the RFQ, you give the most points to that respondent, right? I don't know what the penalty will be for the town not being able to be under contract by the end of December. I think we should try very hard to avoid that outcome. But it's a kind of a match, if you like. The vendor is going to show you the software that they use. You're going to make a decision about the vendor on the basis of the software that they're showing you and who the vendor is.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing a little bit is just like a kind of a different approach to identify different approach to try to identify someone to put under contract and like leading it with the software decision. And I would have to sort of rather than just sort of putting an RFP out and then like hoping, like in the last instance, we put an RFP out, which was really complicated. And at least 2 board members had advised against such a long and lengthy RFP. But nonetheless, it went out and we got this, out of state bidder who hadn't done a reappraisal necessarily in the full context. So I just want to, so I think it's just like I'm hearing like a different approach to the RFP itself, and having the software be the center, and then inviting demonstrations as part of that work. And so for the sake of having a different approach to an RFP and hoping that there's a different outcome, that makes sense, because we didn't necessarily have a good outcome to the previous RFP without these things in place. And as long as we move quickly and demonstrate that we are diligent, then hopefully the state will see that as a theme of this meeting. Okay. Anything else? Any other summaries or thoughts before I turn to Cheryl? Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, thank you, Roger, and the select board. So first of all, the previous RFP that was sent out was a very long and lengthy one that Neil Fulton had prepared as town manager prior to the listers being involved in it. We used that one and we received one response. So with that, we took the advice of that board and we went to the Vermont Assessor and Listers Association's website and found a much briefer version of a RFP, which we liked, and we thought it was quite compatible to the desires of what the select board was looking for this time around. So it's a much shorter version, and in that RFP, we included the software that we currently use for appraising property values, for the assessment of property values. We support the use of the one we currently have because the contract assessor that we hired is now familiar with that software and becomes more familiar with it. Both Pam and I have been trained by Patriot Properties to use the software, and we've become quite familiar with how to use it. And we're able to do more of that as time goes on. And lastly, there wouldn't be a cost to continuing to use the Patriot Properties CAMA software. That doesn't mean that Patriot Properties is going to be available to do a townwide reappraisal. They're not. There is, just for Aaron's benefit and anybody else that might not remember, there's a list of approved assessing companies that the state of Vermont has, and those are the group that we submit the RFP to, because the state won't approve a plan unless they're an approved company that's going to reappraise the town. So that has to be the case. And there are firms approved by the state of Vermont that know how to use Patriot Properties software. And while the one response we received was from a company that's based in New Hampshire, each of the individuals of that company had previously worked in Vermont and had worked for other companies and had done Vermont appraising prior to their current status. So that's why we have put forth the RFP for the least disruptive option, a one that isn't going to be costly and we know works for the town of Norwich. We know because Spencer and the listers have talked about this a lot. And we would be really appreciative of you trusting us and believing that we have the base of knowledge as to what to recommend to the select board. We're not wanting to recommend something that wouldn't be in the best interest of the town. So the deadline of December 9th is really close. I know you've mentioned the end of December, but to our understanding, the deadline is December 9th. So that puts it right at the beginning of December. And I just would like to say that we're we're very confident that what we've put forth in an RFP, if you wish to remove some of it, tone it down some way, shorten it, whatever your thoughts are, what was what we were looking for from the board in order to move forward.
I think part of the problem is we're conflating the reappraisal, which we all agree is like work that, we are entrusted by the voters to perform, right? And that a reappraisal is also is now required to happen. Like, we get that. And I think that's one issue. The second issue is, what question does this board have for determining the vendor, right, and its value to the town of Norwich? That is, and also and determining its cost. That is like squarely sort of our domain to move briskly through and determine. So I think what this conversation has been about was, how do we as a group, right, to determine that vendor and its software and its relationship to the state, and then how does that serve the reappraisal and your work? Okay. That's how I'm seeing this conversation.
Well, I just want to say, Roger, the appraisal software is a decision, but a lot of the approved firms may have knowledge of how to use that. They don't need to bring a package with them. They can use what we ask them to use. And there is going to be an option to go to the an online version of this software, assessing software, that will make it even better for everybody.
Okay.
But the assessment of property, Roger, just a second. The assessment of properties is done in the lister's office, and that's the reason for the CAMA software. It is what we use in that office to get the grand list created.
Right.
The connection of that to the Vermont Pi, which is the program that Rod spoke about, that the state has purchased, all the CAMA softwares are going to have to be able to talk to Vermont Pi. And that's what the state has told all the vendors of CAMA software. Yours has to work. You've got to write the patch to make it work with the new grand list module the state has purchased.
So, and I think that tension goes back to Marcia's point about the sandbox. So let's get back to Marcia. Maybe she'll come back to that. But go ahead, Marcia.
So it sounds like we're using something, and Patriots, I mean, anybody can access Patriots. So isn't that getting to what Rod was hoping, that there'd be some public access, which I think there is, and there's no cost to it. So I'm not seeing the downside with just going with that and looking for a vendor. I mean,
so we're getting into substantive discussion about the agenda item, and that is like not the purpose. And this is my fault because where I've led us into this, right? So in terms of the future agenda item, to learn about this question of the software and the vendor, and then also how it relates to the reappraisal, what is the course of action? What information does the board want to see brought back to move us forward, to frame that agenda item? That is the question that I have for this group, and then we'll move on. Go ahead, Aaron.
In general, I like the idea of evaluating all the software out there as best possible and all the vendors out there as best as possible before moving forward, rather than going into it with a constraint. And I think that's what Rod is suggesting. And I think that's a good process. And I don't see that we're going to, the deadline is so impossible. I doubt there, you say 4 or 5 packages, there's probably not that many vendors on that list. I think we put out a simple RFP and we'll get a set of responses and we'll evaluate them. And I don't think that's going to be a possible crunch.
Okay, that's great. So go ahead, Marcia.
So now I'm getting confused if we're talking about an RFP for a vendor plus an RFP for an appraiser. We're never going to meet the December deadline.
I think my question was just, what information do we need to be, we discussed a little bit about some of the landscape. I think what information would we like to have prepared for us for the next agenda item? So it could just be a matter of, the town manager, because as Cheryl alluded to, the town manager had a direct role in developing an RFP in dialogue with everyone. So we can provide that directive and we can review it. And then with this input, that we're hearing about the software and then move from there. We could be asked to approve an RFP that has like this scope considered in it, I guess, is one thing that we could do. Go ahead, Marcia.
Well, I guess if we'd started this in July, I would say we had time to do an RFP for software, which I would love to do. But I think at this point, we need just an RFP for the appraiser. And that's what I'd like to see for the next meeting, or even an earlier meeting if we had to have a special one, because I think this is getting critical.
Okay. Rod, have I misunderstood any of this framing in what you have discussed? Has the board misunderstood any of the framing? What, Kristen?
No, but I feel like it's important to emphasize the points that Cheryl and I guess Marsha was making too. Time is of the essence here, and the context for the reappraisal statewide is that there are a limited number of available firms, and there are a lot of towns that need a reappraisal. And so the plan is what needs to be solidified by December 9th, or at least as close to that as humanly possible. So if there are vendors that are familiar with and have a license with Assess Pro, which is the system, the software system that we currently use, and there's more than one of them, and I believe that there is more than one vendor using Assess Pro, and the Board of Listers doesn't have a concern with staying with that software platform, and neither does the town assessor. You have two choices before you, and I'm happy to prepare a document for your approval by the next select board meeting, which it would be seek vendors responding to an RFQ or an RFP using the identified software, which is Assess Pro,
right,
or frame it so that vendors could respond to the RFP, but propose their own proprietary software or the software that they work with. And then the town would form a group that would review the responses to the RFP and select the best response on the basis of, are they available? Are they capable of going under contract by December 9th, which is basically a month from now. So which is to say 2 select board meetings, right? So you need to get the RFP out before the next, no later than the next select board meeting 2 weeks from now. You'd need to set the response date no later than 3 weeks, and then you need to spend a week reviewing the responses. If they're gonna want to demonstrate software to you, it's going to elongate that process. But that's the compression. That's how much compression you're dealing with.
Okay, and that makes sense, because the last RFP yielded a bid that had us moving software anyway, right?
I believe so, or some kind of negotiated situation around software. So, if people want to just cut to the chase and stick with Assess Pro, I think Assess Pro not that it makes much difference, but I think that the new database that the state has built has been developed by the same company as Assess Pro.
All right. So why don't we let's get a document to review. Rod, can you please review what has been forwarded to us by the listers, so we have the benefit of your feedback, make the assumption of Assess Pro, and then also provide an opportunity for the other ones, which are, I don't know, there's like a list.
Vision and ProVal.
Yeah. How's that sound, everyone, in the interest of moving along?
Very good.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks. I'm moving us along, Cheryl, only because we're going to be talking with you next meeting about all of this. Okay. Thank you. All right. So the boiler replacement, Tracy Hall. Rod, what we'll be seeing in a future agenda item with that?
My expectation is that by the next select board meeting, you'll have a draft report, a report on the condition of the boilers, the existing boilers, and a recommendation from the consultant that we've retained to look at the energy profile of Tracy Hall, suggesting either the most likely, I think, the replacement of one boiler with a newer boiler, so that the stability of the heating system over the winter is more certain. And then that will allow the town to make longer term decisions about the future of the building with regard to heating, ventilation, and cooling, as well as air quality. And so that's a broader range of topics to be discussed, including how the building is, how space is arranged inside the building and so forth. But the recognition is that the building envelope is in such poor condition, and the dramatic lack of insulation is so significant that the short-term practical solution here is to ensure heat over the winter, which is in question given the age of the boilers, and that a new fuel oil boiler be installed to replace one of the two boilers.
Okay, so just to clear, the future agenda item is like asking for an expenditure.
It will be asking to approve the purchase and installation of a replacement boiler is what I believe.
Okay.
That's what we're working on right now.
Okay, Mary, go ahead.
We'll want to know if we're going to have supply chain issues or, availability would be nice. We could make a plan and then it could fall through. So
one of the requirements for the people bidding on the boiler is that they've got it or that they can get it.
Okay.
The deeper issue is whether they've got the staff to do it. That's less certain.
I see. Yeah.
The earliest we could guarantee it being installed is probably December. It's a very large object. It would have to come in. The old one has to be broken into pieces in the basement before it can be taken out, because there's only a human door accessing the boiler room. The boiler is 5 feet long and 6 feet tall, so it won't go through the door. So there'll be several people down there pulling it apart, breaking it into small pieces. There's an asbestos pipe that will need to be dealt with as hazardous waste and paid for its removal. There'll be other cleanup costs associated with the work, and then the new boiler will have to be brought in pieces and then assembled in situ. So it won't be a small project.
Right. Thank you. But yeah, got to get on with that.
All right, board reorg is self-explanatory. Mary will summarize the discussion of the committee responses that I'll send to her at long last. And then we have personnel policy. I think the personnel policy and working with the attorneys on the personnel policy is your prerogative, Rod. I think the board would like to begin that work. I don't know how you would manage that in your. Go ahead, Mary.
Why is it the town manager's responsibility?
It was advised that the personnel policy because it relates to. We were advised by our counsel that it is
appropriate. Okay.
That it would be appropriate for Rod to direct the council. I don't.
Okay.
It's 1019, but that was what we were advised. Okay. So I guess my question, Rod, do you want on a future agenda item? Do you want to? Is there capacity to begin a discussion or a plan for these revisions?
When I look at this list of future agenda items, I would say that the personnel policy will not be in shape for the October 26th meeting, and I'm not sure it'll be ready for the 1st November meeting either.
No, we're not we looking for it to be. I think it's. We would like it to begin. Is it possible for it to begin?
I don't know if the work will begin on the personnel policy before November.
Okay. Anything else, board members, under future agenda items?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mary.
The signatures on checks and the collateralization, those two, and perhaps a update on the co-equal branches of government.
Right. So you're referring. We had a motion that directed Mary to begin discussions for successful interactions between elected officials and town staff, and so Mary's begun that work, and she'll have an update for us. It sounds like at the next meeting.
Right.
Okay. Anything else? That sounds like more than enough for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm also thinking if I had to chuck anything or table anything, it would probably be the committee responses. But I'll do my best. I'll keep it a very succinct analysis, but you have to get me those.
I know.
If you could get those to me, it will be easier for me to crank it out.
I'll compiling it as I have to search my inbox. Rod, do you have is there budget sheets or any high level information that can be prepared that can be prepared, but that you would like board feedback on, or the benefit of board review? You know, any of these worksheets that you had previously used with fielding for the budget, which is upcoming?
I think that my expectation would be that, given the feedback that I received, the fielding that I received with the last budget, that we would stick with the same worksheets, basically the same format. And the calculation that would be made would be with regard to responding to the level of inflation that we've experienced and what the predicted level of inflation is going to be, with a couple of identified line items that will need to be reconsidered, including things, you know, fairly obscure things such as the line item for tree removal. So we are receiving an increasing number of requests for tree removal in the town right of way, which is an area where the town has a liability, and the line item that provides for that is inadequate for the number of jobs that we're called on to do, and we're constrained because we're liable on some level. But the line item is like $8,000 a year, and to get rid of a 200-foot tree is like a $7,000 job. So we've got several very large trees in the right of way that need to be removed, and they are very expensive jobs to do, and we do not have a budget allocation to do it. So there's a handful of things such as that, but for the most part, I would expect the budget to look very similar to the previous budget, just adjusted for inflation.
Okay, anything else that board members would like to discuss or propose for future agenda items? All right, I'll move us on to the next the next item, which is public participation. Any members of the public would like to participate? Would like to make a comment? Okay, Stuart Richards, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I'd just like to read into the record a letter that was written by HR Happens. It was written to Roger Arnold and Claudette Brochu. It's dated April 22. This is a portion of the letter, and I'll send you the whole letter so that you have it for the record as well. The portion that I want to read states, and I'm reading from the letter, Rod Francis was appointed as the full-time town manager. With the change in leadership came a different style of performance management and a more, quote,
excuse me, Stuart, I think you've already read this into the record. You've read this to us, is that right?
No, I have not read it in the record, and I would like to be allowed to complete what I'm saying. It's one more paragraph. The change in management style and substance resulted in pushback at the department leadership level, as well as with some staff, and several complaints have been made to the select board regarding the behavior and overall treatment of staff and leadership by the town manager, including that some employees, quote, do not feel safe. That's the extent of what I'm going to read. You will receive the entire letter, and you'll have it for the file. Thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn? Nobody has anything else. Great work, everyone. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor, please raise your hand. night.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Bye.